Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T. To my loyal subs, members, and Patreons, hi there. I hope you're having a fantastic day. To anyone new here, a warm welcome. Let me just ask that if after watching the video you find you enjoyed it or learned something, please smash the like button. And if you want to support the work I do here, please consider a Patreon membership. I'll leave a link in the description. Now, let's get started. When a long searched for true crime villain is rooted out of his secret lair and his name and face are exposed to the world, information comes out in the beginning that may not be totally accurate. In a bid to arrive at a place where you know what's accurate, I want to share new and refined details about the state in which the 4 female victims, known as the Gilgo Beach 4, were found. So far, 59-year-old Rex Heuermann has been accused of doing in just 3 of the 4 women, but it's been said the police expect to be charging him with the 4th at some point. I'm also going to review the state in which the other 7 sets of remains along Ocean Parkway were found and why the authorities aren't automatically jumping to the conclusion, at least so far, that Heuermann did all of them in. The Gilgo Beach 4's similarities, prior and post-death, are what led authorities to believe all along that the same person took their lives. That's because the perpetrator's modus operandi, or MO, or signature, was the same with all 4 victims. MO has to do with things like how a serialist does his victims in, the type of victims he preys on, where the crimes take place, how he leaves the victims, meaning if they're posed or if they're wrapped in some sort of material, and so on. In early July of 2023, the authorities announced the arrest of Rex Heuermann, who worked as an architect and consultant in Manhattan. Many believed for years prior to anyone being charged for the victims' deaths that the person responsible was probably someone who commutes from Long Island to Manhattan. They were right. Heuermann lived in Massapequa Park, Long Island, and commuted during the week to his office in Midtown. But 7 more sets of remains were also found along that same stretch along Ocean Parkway, and Heuermann, at least so far, has not been charged in connection with those people's deaths. And that's because the MO displayed by their killer, or killers, is different. Also, they weren't clustered close to the Gilgo Beach 4. They were farther down Ocean Parkway. So one of the questions is, could someone like Rex Heuermann have had a different MO early on and then changed it as he evolved into a more experienced perpetrator? Did he get better at his sick craft over time and refine his skills and further develop a unique MO? Or is it more likely that the other 7 victims were harmed by someone else? Let's talk about it. I'll begin with the similarities seen among the Gilgo Beach 4. Some of these details you may already know, others you may not. 1. All 4 worked as escorts and advertised on Craigslist and Backpage.com. 2. All 4 were contacted by someone using a burner phone just prior to disappearing. Note that Rex Heuermann had 7 registered burner phones. 3. All 4 disappeared between 2007 and 2010. 4. All 4 had been lured away from the safety of their own turf, whether that be a hotel room in New York City or Long Island, or their own home on Long Island. Escorts either take in-house calls, meaning the John comes to them, or they take outbound calls, which are not as safe, where they travel to wherever the John is at. All 4 of the victims were lured away from the safety of their own turf to meet this John on his turf along the south shore of Long Island. We know from Amber Costello's roommate, Dave Schaller, that whoever got her to leave her house had called her many times and had offered her big money to leave that house, $1,500, which was way over her normal fee. Clearly, the perpetrator never had any intention of paying her that day. 5. All 4 Gilgo Beach victims had hazel green eyes. 6. All were in their 20s. 7. 3 of the 4 were under 5 feet tall. Melissa Bartholomew was 4 feet 10 inches tall. Maureen Brainerd Barnes was 4 feet 11 inches. Megan Waterman was the anomaly. She was 5 feet 5 inches tall. Amber Costello was 4 feet 11 inches tall. All were slender, all the better to transport to a dumping ground after the crime. 8. All 4 victims were discovered in 2010 when searchers were out looking for another missing escort, Shannon Gilbert. The 4 were all in the same section along Gilgo Beach, and they were precisely placed 500 feet apart from each other. Whoever put them there took the time to roughly measure the distance. I heard a profiler on the A&E 2016 docuseries about the Long Island victims, called The Killing Season, say that the perpetrator responsible for the Gilgo 4 began his hunting season each year starting in June. I found that fascinating because June marks the start of summer vacation for most people. And we've heard that Heuermann's wife traveled each year with their children to her native Iceland for an extended summer vacation. When the family was away, Rex Heuermann was left home alone to indulge in his depraved obsessions and fantasies. Each of the Gilgo 4 victims went missing during the summer months. Maureen Brainerd Barnes vanished in July of 2007. Melissa Bartholomew went missing in July of 2009. Megan Waterman disappeared on June 6, 2010. And Amber Costello went missing on September 2nd of 2010. This in turn led me to wonder if the authorities decided to arrest Heuermann in early July this summer because they were aware that his hunting season was on and they were fearful he might strike if his wife went to Iceland. So I'm also wondering if his wife had that trip booked and if because of her husband's arrest, she was forced to cancel it. Another reason to be totally ticked off at him. Also curious to note, when Megan Waterman left the hotel she was at in Long Island to meet with her final John before she vanished, she left the hotel without her keys, wallet, and phone. And when Amber Costello left her house to meet with the client who said he would pay $1,500, she also left without her purse and her phone. First, it's highly unusual for them to do these appointments away from the safety of their turf. Second, why would they ever leave without their phones? It has me wondering if the same client, allegedly Heuermann, said something like, "I'll pay you $1,500 with the caveat that you meet me where I want to meet and that you leave your cell phones behind because I'm a well-known married architect and I can't be traced to escorts. That's the deal." Or did these people know Heuermann? Had they had him as a client before and they both felt safe leaving without their things? That to me doesn't really seem likely. This same profiler said that the way the women's bodies were laid out and where they were meant that he, Heuermann, was in essence displaying them there as his trophies. So you could say that the spot where the 4 were clustered was the perpetrator's trophy garden. The profiler said that's why he took care to place each victim approximately 500 feet apart from the other, almost like you display sporting trophies from school. I've also heard that the Heuermann home looks out toward that spot along Gilgo Beach. Could Heuermann have used binoculars from his house to peek in on his victims as they lay decomposing in that marsh? Melissa Bartholomew's family had the misfortune of getting 8 phone calls from Melissa's killer, who used her phone to call them. In one of those calls, he admitted he'd done Melissa in and said that he was going to go look at her body. So it would seem that if Heuermann is the perpetrator, he wanted to keep his victims as trophies properties and keep them as close to home as possible so that he could easily visit them. If you make the argument that a serialist doesn't start doing this in his 40s, he starts much earlier, then I'm wondering if one of the reasons Rex Heuermann wanted to buy his family home and live in it was that maybe he started earlier and there are other victims concealed somewhere else nearby. The profiler on the A&E show also recommended back in 2015 or 2016 that the authorities look for the perpetrator where the victims were found because that would be his turf, the place where he felt most comfortable. Heuermann grew up in the house he was living in with his family. He knew the area around there and those beaches along the South Shore. He knew them inside and out. He would have played there as a child. The authorities have said all of the Gilgo Beach 4 were buried in a similar fashion, but no one has specified if that literally means they were buried under inches or feet of dirt or simply nestled on top of the ground in the thick brush and grasses of the marsh. From all that I've read, it seems like they were nestled in the brush and not buried in the ground. The Gilgo 4's individual crime scenes also share similarities. All 4 women were bound at the head, the chest, and the legs. We've heard that ropes, belts, and tape were used for this. That bondage element, along with Heuermann's many online searches for horrible things like the essay of children and women, spell perhaps a sexual sadist, or as I like to say, one sick F. Dennis Rader, also known as BTK, said that Heuermann was a copycat of his crimes. All of the Gilgo 4 were intact. They were wrapped in camouflage print burlap that is normally used for duck hunting. Did I mention that Rex Heuermann was an avid duck hunter? I think it's safe to say that if Heuermann is the perpetrator, then he was both a hunter of ducks and other animals and escorts, and he selected that camouflage burlap for its ability to blend into the terrain in the marsh, which is another reason I don't think the bodies were found buried in the ground. The burlap might have also served a secondary purpose, and that could be to be part of his signature. These sickos really enjoy their craft. They like their notoriety. They like to mess with people's heads. So I wouldn't doubt that this was part of the signature. Now let's talk about specifics with each of the 4 Gilgo Beach victims. Note, by the way, that these victims weren't necessarily hardened escorts who'd been doing this work for a very long time. Some had just started out because of a desperate need for money, and this was a job or business, if you will, that they could start with just some photos and internet access. Write up a Craigslist ad for yourself, include some photos, and voila, you're a businesswoman of sorts. Right after Amber Costello placed her first ad, the phone rang in something like a half hour. Back to how the 4 victims were found. Melissa Bartholomew was nude beneath the bindings and the burlap, as were Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. That belt with the initials WH was found, I believe, with Brainerd Barnes' remains. Many believe those initials are for Heuermann's grandfather, William Heuermann. Now, Maureen was the first of the Gilgo 4 beach victims to go missing. Remember, she disappeared in 2007. If Heuermann had just started his career as a serialist, it would be Brainerd Barnes' remains and crime scene that would likely show mistakes by the perpetrator who hadn't yet honed his craft. I think the belt left there was a huge mistake, and it likely plagued Heuermann's mind until he was arrested. He knew that belt could potentially lead the authorities to him once they put together all the puzzle pieces of other circumstantial evidence. By the time he did Melissa Bartholomew in, he perhaps was a more skilled killer. The first 3 victims reportedly died by having something tightened around their necks, making it impossible to breathe. Amber Costello, however, may have been suffocated. I'm speculating here because the police have said one victim died of suffocation by having underwear stuffed down her throat. I'm speculating that it was Amber based on the fact that when some creepy person, likely the perpetrator, left creepy timeout dolls at each of the Gilgo Four's burial sites after their remains had been found, and their families were going there to pray and memorialize their loved ones, the doll found at Amber's memorial had its mouth cut and gauzy material was stuffed in it. I think the perpetrator put those dolls there to further torment the victims' families. We know Heuermann was keeping tabs on the news about the crimes and was searching online for information about the investigation as well as the victims' families. He was also making phone calls to some of the victims' families. It sounds like he couldn't help himself from going out to those memorial sites because he was risking getting caught if the police had been surveilling the area to see if the perpetrator would return. But maybe Heuermann knew how lax the Suffolk County investigation was back in 2010 and 2011 and 2012, yada, yada, yada. And maybe with binoculars, he was able to keep tabs on who, if anyone, was down at Gilgo Beach. On to the 7 other victims whose remains were discovered farther down Ocean Parkway. The details about the state in which their remains were found illustrate why the authorities don't seem to believe that Heuermann is necessarily responsible, even if his dumping ground for the Gilgo Four was right there nearby. Let's start with 23-year-old Shannon Gilbert, who also worked as an escort. She disappeared in May of 2010 from Oak Beach, which is adjacent to Gilgo Beach. Although her body was found in December 2011, a year after the Gilgo Beach victims, Shannon vanished 1 month before Gilgo Beach victim Megan Waterman and 4 months before Amber Costello. Shannon's remains were located in a marsh on Oak Beach. Although the coroner was unable to say for sure what caused her death, the Suffolk County Police back in 2011 concluded that she was not a homicide victim. They felt Shannon died during a paranoid episode fueled by drugs and alcohol that led her to run half-crazed into the marshes, trip, fall, and drown by accident. 2 of the reasons the police suggested that scenario is because Shannon, allegedly per them, was a known user of cocaine, and because on her 911 call made from the house where she'd been with a client on Oak Beach, her voice sounded slurred at times, and apparently some escorts ply their clients with cocaine to get them to spend more time with them so that they can make more money. But Shannon's family and the family attorney, John Ray, reject the police's scenario. They believe Shannon was murdered. Attorney John Ray pointed out recently that Shannon never mentioned drugs one time in her 23-minute 911 call just prior to disappearing. Ray added, quote, "The idea that she's on drugs and acted wildly also doesn't follow because even if she was on drugs, what kind of drugs would make you do what she did?" Note that autopsy results obtained by Eyewitness News back in 2014 revealed that Shannon did not have drugs in her system at the time of her death. I thought at first that skeletal remains could not be used to test for drugs. However, it turns out that's not true. According to ForensicScienceSimplified.org, quote, "Skeletal remains can be useful to determine prior exposure to drugs and other substances. In these cases, hair can also be sampled," end quote. Another article I read in the Journal of Forensic Sciences said that drugs can be detected in a person's bones years after death. But here's where it gets tricky. Forensic scientist Dr. Larry Koblinski of John Jay College told Eyewitness News in 2014 that the toxicology report actually proves nothing since Gilbert's body was out in the harsh elements of that marsh for more than a year and a half before being found. He said, quote, She was a known cocaine user, and the fact that we find no evidence of cocaine again suggests that this tissue is highly compromised, end quote. So he was saying that her tissue was so decomposed thanks to time and the harsh seaside elements that the toxicology report findings that no drugs were in her system could not be considered reliable. It's possible she did have drugs in her system, but her tissue no longer showed it. So now I'm not certain anyone can know for sure if Shannon did or did not have any cocaine in her system, unfortunately. The autopsy report obtained by Eyewitness News also said that Shannon was missing parts of her fingers and toes, along with a small bone in her neck. I'm thinking those parts are likely missing because of animal scavengers in that natural environment, but it's also possible that they were taken by a serialist as trophies. That would be weird though, just like a finger and a toe. World-acclaimed forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden performed a second autopsy on Shannon's remains, and he wrote the following in his report. There is insufficient information to determine a definite cause of death, but the autopsy findings are consistent with homicidal strangulation, end quote. Baden wrote that because he saw that the hyoid bone in Shannon's neck had a tiny crack on one edge. Attorney John Ray also pointed out that there was a hole at the base of Shannon's hyoid bone. Of that hole, Ray said, quote, "It appears to be something was either drilled or pushed through that bone, and we couldn't determine what that was, but it was highly unusual," end quote. Now, I do not believe Shannon was found nude or bound as the Gilgo 4 victims were. Attorney John Ray has been quoted as saying that Shannon was wearing a bra in photographs taken of her body, and the band that attaches the two bra cups was cut in half. Ray said, quote, "It wasn't torn like an animal would do." And Shannon was not wrapped in that camouflage burlap either. Note that several of her belongings, including her purse, shoes, and cell phone, were found in the marsh where her body was located, and we know she was frantically running away from either a real or an imagined predator. So it makes sense that things would drop as she was running as fast as she could in that very hard to navigate marsh environment. Note that Shannon was also diagnosed as being bipolar, and according to WebMD, people suffering from severe bipolar disorder may, quote, have hallucinations where they see or hear things that aren't there. They may also have delusions where they firmly believe in something that just isn't true. This is when it's easy to confuse bipolar disorder for schizophrenia, end quote. For all these reasons, the authorities do not seem to believe Heuermann is responsible for Shannon's death. At least that's what it seems like right now to those of us who don't have access to the case files or the investigation. Some of the remains found in 2011 along Ocean Parkway belonged to a 20-year-old named Jessica Taylor. She went missing on July 21st of 2003. Taylor was 5 feet 6 inches tall, and she worked as an escort out of New York City. She was last seen, supposedly, near the Port Authority bus terminal, likely preparing to travel to Long Island. A guy named Khalil White, who has been described as both her boyfriend and pimp, told the producers of that A&E docuseries that detectives told him that Taylor was wrapped in burlap. But of course that's hearsay, and Taylor was previously reported to have been found on plastic. Whoever harmed Taylor took the time to cut her into pieces and to dump various parts of her body in 2 locations, some in Manorville, Long Island, and some 45 miles away from there along Ocean Parkway. Taylor's headless and handless nude torso was discovered in Manorville, in 2003, but her skull, hands, and right forearm were found in 2011 out there on Ocean Parkway. Note that the torso was discovered in a wooded area of Manorville by a lady walking her dog. Imagine the horror of that. You're having a lovely stroll with your little pup, and then you see something odd. You get a little closer to get a better look, and your mind is like, what the is that? That's a sight you'll never forget. One of the ways Taylor was eventually identified was through a tattoo on the right side of her back. Whoever took her life used a razor to try and slice the tattoo off her body. She had a dozen crooked razor gashes over that tattoo, and when medical examiners carefully pushed the skin together, they could see that it revealed a tattoo of a red heart with angel wings that said Remy's Angel. And according to that Khalil guy who was either her boyfriend and or pimp, she called him Remy. Note that in an article on the PIX11 News website about the case, it said that Taylor's remains indicated that she was tied up. Moving on to 24-year-old Valerie Mack, who also worked as an escort. She was just 5 feet tall, and she weighed maybe 100 pounds and had hazel green eyes. In that respect, Mack totally fits the type of the Gilgo 4 victims, but Mack went missing in 2000, so 7 years before any of the Gilgo 4 victims. And like Jessica Taylor, her remains were also found in 2 locations, and they were the same locations as where Taylor's were dumped. Some in Manorville, Long Island, and some along Ocean Parkway. Thus, Mack was dismembered. For a long time, her remains on Ocean Parkway were referred to as Jane Doe number 6. Mack was reportedly tied up just like Taylor. According to a former detective who spoke to PIX11 News, both Mack and Taylor's leg areas were, quote, bound in a ball. The detective said, quote, you'd have to be a hunter to do something like that. End quote. So Valerie Mack's torso and leg area were discovered in 2003 in Manorville, and her skull, hands, and right foot were found along Ocean Parkway in 2011. Because Mack disappeared in 2000, we know that her remains were out in the wild for many years before they were discovered. Mack was eventually identified through a public genealogy website. In fact, it was the first time New York law enforcement was successful in identifying the victim of a cold case using a public genealogy website. Note that Mack was orphaned at a young age. Her aunt had apparently submitted DNA to this public genealogy website, and she was the person that led the police to Valerie Mack's identity. It seems that likely whoever harmed Taylor and Mack was the same person. That person displayed the same MO in how he tried to hide their bodies, how he took their bodies apart, and how he left their remains in various places. Could that have been Heuermann? The authorities are currently looking at Heuermann in connection to Mack and Taylor, but they have also looked at a former Manorville carpenter and married dad named John Bittroff in connection with the deaths of Mack and Taylor. Sounds like this Bittroff would have had whatever tools were needed to chop up a body since he was a carpenter. But of course, Rex Heuermann has also said that he was a woodworker and that he made furniture out of a workshop at his home, so he too would have these materials. Bittroff lived only 3 miles from where Mack and Taylor's partial remains were discovered in Manorville, and Bittroff was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison in 2017 for taking the lives of 2 escorts in the early 1990s. So he does have a track record for this type of crime. The victims back then, Rita Tangretti and Colleen McNamee, were discovered 2 months apart, not very far from Bittroff's home. According to investigators, the married dad was also tied to the death of a third escort. According to law enforcement, all 3 victims had been posed in a certain position, and all 3 were missing their left shoe. When PIX 11 News out of Long Island asked another law enforcement source about Bitroff and the Manorville victims connected to the Gilgo Beach 4 victims and Ocean Parkway, they received this response: "We're looking at him very closely, but we're not ruling out Heuermann. So it's possible Heuermann could have been using a different MO if he is found to be responsible for Mack and Taylor's deaths, but it sounds more likely that this Bitroff dude is the responsible party." So that means when everyone thought that Long Island had one serialist whom they referred to as Liss, the Long Island serial killer, Long Island likely really had 2 people dumping bodies. Moving on to an Asian male whose body was also found along Ocean Parkway in 2011. He was dressed in women's clothing, and thus it sounds like his body was intact. I haven't heard anything about that body being tied up in any way. So was he done in by a third perpetrator who wasn't into bondage or dismemberment? Sort of sounds like it. The as yet unidentified 5'6" tall male is believed to have been between 17 and 23 years old when he went missing, and he also had terrible teeth, and 4 of them were missing. The police said they believe this person had been missing for at least 5 years before his remains were found in 2011, so that would put his disappearance around 2006. He may also have had a muscular skeletal disorder that affected how he walked. His cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma to the head. It sounds like he perhaps had 1 or more skull fractures. Now, some believe this Asian male might be a 20-year-old student who went to Stony Brook University on the north shore of Long Island. His name was Jimmy Tsui. I think it's Tsui. Jimmy vanished in August of 1998. He was 5 feet 10 inches tall, little taller than how they estimated the height of the Asian, and weighed 140 pounds. So Jimmy was about 4 inches taller than the height listed for the male found along Ocean Parkway. But if you look at photos of Jimmy, he does somewhat resemble the composite drawing of the Asian male's face. And then there's a Jane Doe referred to as Peaches because of a peach tattoo that was found on her body. Some of her remains, namely her extremities, were found along Ocean Parkway in 2011. But another part, her torso, was found in 1997 in Hempstead Park, Long Island. Thus, she too was cut up and her body parts were dumped in multiple locations. Peaches died earlier than any of the Gilgo Beach victims. Her dates seem to be closer to those of Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor. Remember, Mack vanished in 2000 and Taylor in 2003. Could whomever harmed Peaches have been the same person who did in Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack? I'd say that seems logical due to the MO of all 3 being cut up and dumped in more than one place, and because of the dates that they went missing. Could Peaches be the work of that Bitroff dude? Seems like a yes. Then there's an unidentified toddler who was also found along Ocean Parkway in 2011. I say unidentified because no one knows her real name, but through DNA, the police determined that she was Peaches' daughter. The toddler was intact and found wrapped in a blanket, which seems like something a mother would do. Remember little JJ Vallow? He too was wrapped in a blanket. Maybe Peaches was told that she and her child were going to die, and she asked, please let me at least wrap her in her blanket. Or maybe the perpetrator had a soft spot in his otherwise black heart for this little child. As for why a baby would be there, I've heard that sometimes escorts can't find a babysitter, so maybe they bring their baby with them to a tryst. And then there's one more Jane Doe whose skull was found along Ocean Parkway in 2011. DNA from that skull was linked to legs that washed ashore on nearby Fire Island. How horrible is that? You're taking a walk down the beach and you stumble on that. So the MO of whoever did this to her matches that of whoever did in Taylor, Mack, and Peaches. Hearing all of this makes me seriously question if Rex Heuermann is the most likely killer of all 11 victims found along Ocean Parkway. I don't think he is. Maybe it's just that serialists think alike when it comes to choosing the perfect dumping ground. Those marshes along Ocean Parkway in Long Island are, I hate to say it, pretty ideal for dumping bodies. People don't hike in the wet, marshy areas, and that beach isn't as populated as, say, one in Miami. This allowed the bodies to go undetected for a long time, right up until Shannon Gilbert vanished, thanks to Shannon and 2 other people dialing 911 in the early morning hours when she was seen running through Oak Beach. The police knew roughly where to search for her, and when they searched there, instead of finding Shannon, they found those other sets of remains. So were it not for Shannon Gilbert, the other 10 people who died might never have been found. So do you think Rex Heuermann could be responsible for all 11 victims? Or do you think it's more likely that one or more perpetrators found the marshes along Ocean Parkway in Long Island the perfect dumping ground? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for the privilege of your time today, and I'll see you next time on Bed Crime Stories. Now, if you enjoyed this, for goodness sake, smash the like button and subscribe.